Hey friend, welcome to the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Emily Cleghorn. This podcast is for mamas navigating childhood trauma while also walking through mamahood. I'm so excited that you've decided to take some time out of your day to join me and tune in. I hope you find this podcast uplifting and empowering. Let's get to it. Hey there. Before we jump into this episode, I want to let you know about something that is brand new that you have access to as a Mamahood After Trauma listener. Now, tell me, does this sound like you? You want to give your littles a positive childhood experience. You want the steps to finally heal your childhood trauma. You're tired of the fear holding you back in life, and you enjoy being a mama and you want to be more present. If you answered yes to any of the above, I would invite you to check out the Mama Untriggered private podcast series. This is a 5-part private podcast series that teaches you how to ditch the emotional roller coaster and bust out of the fear controlling your mamahood. Let's teach you how to calm your nervous system through small, simple steps. I mean, parenting books and workshops are great, but we believe it's better to give you short, actionable audio clips that allow you to take action right away so that they can't escape from your mom brain, right? If this sounds at all interesting to you, I would invite you to head over to subscribepage.io/mama untriggered. That's subscribepage.io/mama untriggered. Now, let's go into this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I am so excited that you have taken some time out of your day to tune in and listen to this episode. Today, we have the privilege of being joined by Stefana. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to meet you and to have this conversation around releasing the burden of trauma, because for so many trauma survivors, we search and we search and we search. We look under all of the rocks looking for the thing that is going to help us to release the burden, dissipate the black cloud, if you will, that's hovering over our heads. And so I'm so excited to dive into this conversation today.
I love that you're doing this. I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here to share what I have found to be very helpful for me.
All right, let's dive right in. What have you found to be the most helpful in releasing the burden?
The most important and most helpful is to tell the truth and to feel everything. So what does that mean? When we're searching under the rocks, when we're looking in every book, when we're looking out there, when we're trying to find some answer, we're scrolling through this, or we're asking questions out there, we're missing what needs to be really confronted. And that's what's inside us, what we're really feeling. And most people cannot do that. I could not do that for 20 years. And it took me seeing my precious infant in the hands of the perpetrator of early child sexual abuse that I snapped out of it and was instantly able to be the vigilant, observer and fight for this precious life that wasn't fought for in her childhood. And I spent nearly 30 years trying to solve that. What's wrong with me? Why is this? And that is the trap. That's the
Mhm.
trap. But I didn't have the tools as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old to look at what's going on, reflect at this, tell the truth of what I'm really feeling. I was terrified of my feelings. I was confused by them. I didn't understand them. And then when I asked for help about it, I was told it was my fault. And then I blamed myself for another 10 years. And then I tried to solve that with other, you try to solve the problem with, and then the next solution becomes your next problem. It was a complete sad situation
Mhm.
as I look back. But now I'm in my 50s. And would I change any of that? Of course I would. For that little girl, for that precious little girl that now I can say and hold her and love her unconditionally. I can say that now because I have and do to this day feel everything that comes up. That is the only way we can transmute and transcend and transform the trauma. Because those wounds, I can't make them go away. I mean, this is my life, right? It's
Mhm.
like, I can't pretend. I'm going to pretend that never, I had a perfect job. It was wonderful. And that's a lie. And my body knows it. My mind knows it. My heart knows it. But it doesn't mean that I'm a bad, dirty, disgusting piece of garbage or whatever the other things happen, whatever the trauma is, right? It doesn't have to be sexual abuse. It could be any kind of trauma, right? Any. It doesn't matter the size. So you don't want to judge or get in on, oh, well, my trauma is not that bad. I should suck it up, buttercup. No, that's why we have to take back personal responsibility. And if we can model that for our children, I think that we will raise sons and daughters that are whole.
Mhm.
And when they do experience their own trauma, and they will know to tell the truth about it and not, oh, it's okay, it's fine. And then they go and, you know, scroll on their phone or get distracted by something else or look for some other solution to numb the pain or to make it go away or to ignore it or to run from, all of those. So that's what I would say. You have to tell the truth. And I don't think there's a lot of people on this planet telling the truth right now. We
Mm.
can see that. So we as mamas have to start that. It has to be a movement that we hold that space and know that it's safe to tell the truth. That if we are afraid and sad or feeling depressed or anxiety and all of these feelings, tell the truth about it to yourself first. Don't
Mhm.
make it mean something that you're bad or there's something wrong. It's like, wait a minute, I'm actually feeling, wow, I'm feeling really sad right now. What's that about? Let me look at this. And you
Mhm.
take the flashlight to that, not a sledgehammer and or a pill that would numb it out. You look at it and you put it in the light and see what there is to see and feel what there is to feel, because those are messages, those are gifts, and they are the profound pieces of who you are when you look at them. And again, shed the light on them. And then you can show up to your life and you can show up to being a mom. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's what I would say. That's my number one. And I do it. And I specifically and intentionally and consciously do it on a daily basis. And I block that time. And sometimes I ask for help. And sometimes there are the best days ever where it's like, oh, no, I got this. And some days it's really hard.
Mhm.
And that's okay too. But if we keep honest with ourselves and be honorable, and I want to bring up this because I hear a lot of uh, pieces around confidence. They're not confident. I need more self-confidence. Well, what's confidence? It's comes from confidere, trust, to trust. And you have to start by trusting yourself. I
Mhm.
had a facade for many years of, oh, she's so confident. Look at Stefana, she's so confident. It was a facade, right? I put that out there because I was running so far from away from my past, trying to get away from it, but it was right there and I was dragging it along with me. And as soon as I stopped and, okay, I have to sit with this pain and I know it's going to be excruciating. And once I started to do that, that's when the trauma transformed. And not just the childhood trauma, right? My father was killed in a house in my parents' house fire. My parents lost their home and my dad was killed in that. And he was my best friend, my mentor. And I remember getting that phone call and dropping to the floor and thinking, not even thinking, it was so painful. I couldn't even, it was just so painful. But at that stage, I had already worked through so much trauma of my earlier childhood that I was, I worked so hard to stay present with every moment with myself. And to this day, I can recall the phone call, my surroundings around it, because I was so present. And then I had tools to use, right? You probably know emotional freedom technique, tapping,
Mhm.
right? That's a great tool. I have, multiple tools, but being the observer and in doing that, I was able to walk myself through that excruciating pain. Now, one thing I noticed during that time is that I absolutely was not able to put myself out there to others. In fact, I was resentful when people would try to reach out to help. And of course, people want to do that when you've lost a loved one. They want to say you're sorry for your loss, or, and I wanted none of it. In fact, when people did, I became angry. You have no idea, these kinds of things. So you must give yourself the space to do the grieving process or to go through the processing process. And that's why I think it's so important to work with people and to connect with people that have done the work and that are doing the work so that you are supported in a healthy, whole way. Because I've gotten a lot of support in the past that was not help. It was actually more harmful, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, I'll stop talking and you can unpack that. How's that sitting with you?
So so telling the truth about how you're feeling
Mhm.
and being really honest with yourself, and then instead of running away from it, facing it and working through it. So, I guess my next question would be, how does a mama who has had a lifetime of repressing all of those hurtful feelings because they are so painful, how does she go how does she transform from running from her feelings to doing what you're suggesting in telling the truth about it and working through it?
The thing about me being a mom
Mhm.
is that that was the catalyst for me to face my own trauma finally,
Mhm.
the root of it. Because for 15 years prior of me having my first child, I was a therapist
Mhm.
because I wanted to help everybody
Mhm.
because I needed help.
Mhm.
Okay. So as a mom, when my son was born 10 months after my father was killed. And that changes you as well
Mhm.
because this life is precious. And I believe that as moms, We are stewards of the most precious life. And I believe, and I saw this in my own precious, when my first son was born, this precious life was the most clean, perfect, whole, profound, profound. And the only thing that could mess that up or decay that or destroy that or tear anything down of that is anything that I put on him or allowed to be put on him.
Mhm.
And so every day, I don't know that there was an intentional moment, but there was something intentional about being the best mom I could be.
Mhm.
And I connected to my future self of the mom of an 18-year-old and what seeing that young man being a grown young man at 18, whole, healthy, strong in his heart, in his character, in his mind, in his whole being, that he would be a loving and compassionate man, but a strong man in his own power, and he would have tools. Now that intention set me, and I remember sitting in my rocker 8, 9 months pregnant, and I had been through so many books. I was just reading, studying. And the time I was going back to school to become a naturopathic doctor. And that path really opened up some pieces for me to understand, and the new data that I was getting as opposed to this earlier studying that I had as a therapist, is quantum reality, and that everything's created twice, first in the mind and then in the world. And so I began using this tool of quantum reality, of creating first from this dimension of our thoughts. And I became best friends with that woman, that mom of the adult that I raised, that young man, and now my 2 boys that are almost 16 and almost 18. And I am so honored and proud to be their mother. And I want you to know you can do that right now with yourself, with your children, and just go and intentionally set some time for yourself. You must do this. You must create time for yourself to tap into your wholeness so that you can show up to your children in your wholeness. And again, be best friends with that. Ask her. She can be your mentor. If you can't, we don't have to afford a coach or this mentor or whatever. Have your best future self be your mentor, be your guide. I think that was the really a significant piece of how I was able to transcend that, specifically as a mother. And then every moment of my children's every moment was me raising myself as a little girl. And I remember having a lot of anxiety around the age of 4 and 5 when my boys were 4 and 5. And I protected them so vigilantly. I watched everyone around them. And I was very honest with my boys. And communicated about what was happening in my life, in my heart, and allowed them to communicate with me in a way that was safe, what they needed. A great tool that I love is nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg has an incredible body of work. He has since passed, but the work that he has done on this in this world is profound. So I highly recommend that for families, for moms. And I also had the Holistic Moms Group, which is a nonprofit. I became a chapter leader in multiple chapters, started chapters in my area when I moved to a different area and there wasn't one, and cultivated a community of like-minded mamas who were willing to hold this space for ourselves, as well as our children, as well as our sons and daughters. And um, sometimes we need to raise ourselves as we are raising our sons and daughters. And that's, if you can recognize that and be humbled by that, not afraid of that, or not worried that, oh, I need to get this right, but just be humbled in this process of being a mother.
Mhm.
There's so much that can unfold, and it's truly the greatest gift. Every day is the most, in including every struggle that there is.
Mhm.
I remember seeing my 2-year-old who hated the car seat, and I really did not want to put him in the car seat. So we walked. We walked because I didn't like that either. It didn't feel good. And he was telling me this message. And, I know that there's some that say, well, I can't just do what my child says, but they have so much to teach us, so much. And if you can allow them to like really look at what is it that I need to know in this moment? What's the lesson here? Even in that tantrum, I remember like, I just want to get home. I'm hungry. We're tired. Okay, what do I need to do? Well, what can I do? And holding him in love, and loving, holding myself in love in that space, right? Holding myself in respect and encouragement, holding him in respect and encouragement. We need more of this. And as moms, it starts with us. We must lead ourselves this way first, and then we can lead our families and our sons and daughters, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I there be being becoming a mama was the catalyst for me as well.
Mm.
Um, nothing I don't believe anything will open your eyes to how much work you need to do, um, than a little person that you are now responsible for bringing through this life, getting them started. Um, so what are some tips that our listeners can take with them, after they have finished listening to this episode and use to help them release the burden that they're feeling?
Again, it's so in terms of releasing the burden, if we keep focusing on, I've got to get rid of this, I've got to get rid of this burden, it's almost like saying to your little one, we've got to get rid of this. We've got to get rid of something that is part of them. Instead, if you could shift to looking at it, and it's because a lot of times our perspective of this burden is the beliefs that we have made about it.
Mhm.
So for example, the a trauma that I had was the belief I had about myself as a result of that was that I was dirty, and as a result of that dirtiness, that I was unworthy, that I was undeserving, that I was not lovable, and that was unacceptable to me to put out on anyone else. So I turned it inward. And I created that burden and kept it created because I was not able to look at it wholly. If you can take that burden and remove this idea that you need to work on yourself, there's something wrong with you, you need to keep working forever because if you don't, you have to fix yourself. At some point, if we don't recognize, I used to say, okay, there are some broken pieces, but I learned this concept, and it was in a children's book about wabi sabi. And this is the concept where It's a Japanese concept where these dishes, a dish was broken, and the mom would carefully and precisely glue it back together and paint it. And that piece was honored. It was honored. It wasn't discarded and thrown away like we do here. And so that story of the wabi sabi changed me in that moment. And this was when my children were younger. So I was able to apply this a little bit more because I had a very strict perfectionist thing and kind of kept those burdens hidden, but I felt them every single day. Right. And then something else that shifted, and that is this there's a book called Anti-Fragile. And you take this concept of this anti-fragile concept of, I can't remember his name at the moment, Talib, or uh, it's a very long, wonderful name, but anti-fragile. If you look at it, you'll find it online. The concept is this: when you get a package in the mail and it says fragile, don't shake it, you'll break it, right? If you shake it, if you drop it, be careful, be careful, be careful, it's fragile. That's how I felt about myself. The burden made me feel fragile. And when you realize and shift into this concept that you are anti-fragile and can be by your power of choice, is that that burden can actually make you stronger. And if you shift that perspective and you look at, wow, oh my goodness, and you really take in what we've called this burden, and we bring that in, and we use that as the necker to, as the mollusk takes the piece of sand and takes necker and makes the pearl. So you make a pearl with that, not covering it up to hide it, but because using that friction of that burden allows you to grow, allows you to experience this almost the confrontation of, woo, because life is not this 30-minute TV show that gets resolved. And I think we've been traumatized by this false idea in the social media world and in television and in movies. We've been traumatized by that, thinking that we are supposed to be this way. And that's not life. That's not life, right? Imagine our children when our son is learning to walk or our daughter is first standing. How many times do they fall down? So many. How many times do they get back up? That much more. And you would never, ever say to your son or daughter, oh, I know, it's too hard. You've fallen down so many times. It's okay. You don't have to get back up. But that's us. That burden is that opportunity for us to get back up. And if we look at it that way, it will make us stronger. That's anti-fragile. That is wabi-sabi. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Shift your perspective. Shift your
Yes.
perspective. How can our listeners connect with you further if they'd like to do so?
StefanaJohnson.com is my main website. After my son was born and I opened up about my early sexual abuse and the trauma from that. I'd never told anyone after I told the minister when I was 17, and he told me it was my fault, basically. I wrote a book called Finding Joy Beyond Trauma and shared the 5, not really steps, because we're all going to have our own individual steps, but the 5 processes that I use and used to transform that trauma and transcend from holding on to all of that trauma. So that you can find at StefanaJohnson.com. And get all the details there. And I have lots of videos where I share. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will include a link to Stefana's website in the description of this episode, the show notes. Thank you again so much for joining me. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune in to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. If you would like more of the Mamahood After Trauma community, make sure to look in the description of this episode for the link to become a Mamahood After Trauma Inner Circle member. Until next time, Mama, keep